Town Hall is sincerely grateful for the opportunity to invite Seattle audiences and beyond into present tense exchanges of issues, ideas, and creativity, even when we don't get to do it in person. Town Hall will continue to produce online content throughout this fall and into the new year, and as circumstances allow, to even host live streams from our building. Meanwhile, if like me, you simply can't find enough hours in the day in front of a computer, you'll know that many of our past talks are available in video or podcast form under the header Digital Media on our website. But back to tonight's program. It'll last about an hour, including audience Q&A. To ask your own question, use the Ask a Question field at the bottom center of your screen. Town Hall's Shane Unger will return then at the end of the program to facilitate, and he'll try to get to as many as possible. Also know that you can view the event both here on Crowdcast or over on our YouTube page if you want to utilize that platform's closed captioning feature. Town Hall's adding new events and podcasts every day. A few upcoming programs before a healthy midwinter holiday include astrophysicist Mario Livio on the long history and dangerous implications of science deniers from Galileo to the present. Michael Eric Dyson and Robin DiAngelo discussing the prospects for authentic and durable racial reconciliation in America, and a discussion of the essential resilience of theater with critic Michael Riedel and Broadway producer David Stone. Check out more on our calendar at townhallseattle.org. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. Our Arno Mitalski Science Lecture Series is supported by Microsoft, KUOW, the Wyncote Foundation Northwest, and the taxpayers of Washington State. But finally, as most of you know, Town Hall is a member-supported organization first and foremost, and I'd like to thank all of our members watching tonight. As for the rest of you, if you share Town Hall's dedication to a community invigorated by arts and ideas and dedicated to giving voice to as many perspectives as we can stuff into one building, physically or metaphorically, we hope you'll consider a membership as well, or just a gift using the button at the bottom of your screen. One last piece of infomercial. You'll certainly want to learn more about tonight's topic, so I hope you'll consider purchasing a copy of the book here tonight from our partners at Third Place Books. Keep it local, and just maybe the things that we love about this place from before the pandemic will still be around to delight us on the other side. And now for tonight's program. Ed Power is a former staff writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, as well as a writer, editor, general manager, and publisher for the Virginian Pilot newspaper group. He studied at the University of Virginia and was a writing fellow at Columbia, and he's traveled the world surfing and writing from far-flung locales like Mindanao and El Salvador. An avid skier, Ed and his wife moved from Virginia to the mountains of northern Utah. And as an aside, having grown up in Virginia, I can attest that if you want to ski, you're best advised leaving Virginia to do it. The local hill in my childhood was called Wintergreen, and oh my. At any rate, after his move to Utah, Power met Craig Gordon, who had just come from the site of a January 27 avalanche that features prominently in the book. Craig Gordon is the sole avalanche forecaster for the Western Uinta Mountains, an area accessible primarily by snowmobile, and he also handles much of the area's avalanche education for snowmobile groups. Gordon has also done avalanche control for Brighton Ski Area in Utah since the mid-1980s before working as a helicopter ski guide. He's worked for the Forest Service Utah Avalanche Center since 2000. The book that resulted from their collaboration is called Dragons in the Snow, Avalanche Detectives, and the Race to Beat Death in the Mountains. On November 12th, it won the National Outdoor Book Award for Outdoor Literature. And as you have by now gathered, it's the subject of tonight's presentation. Please join me in welcoming Craig Gordon and Ed Power.
Thank you, Ware, for that kind invitation to be here with you at Town Hall Seattle, and also that wonderful welcome and introduction. As Ware said, I'm Edward Power, author of Dragons in the Snow, Avalanche Detectives, and the Race to Beat Death in the Mountains. Welcome to all of you at Town Hall Seattle, and thanks to Town Hall again for their kind invitation to host us tonight. I also want to note that Dragons in the Snow was published in early September by Mountaineers Books there in your hometown of Seattle. With me this evening, as Ware said, is Craig Gordon, a 20-year forecaster with the Utah Avalanche Center and the central character in Dragons in the Snow. Craig has a deep background in backcountry skiing, having also spent 10 years as a patroller and avalanche mitigation manager at Brighton Ski Resort, and also worked as a heliski guide in the Uinta Mountain Range. Craig and I also want to welcome you to where we're coming to you from tonight, the Salt Lake City office of the Utah Avalanche Center. So thanks to them for all their help, and to Chad Bracklesberg, the executive director who's here helping us out tonight. So Craig and I want to begin with this short GoPro video from a Park City area mountain slope.
So let's advance to the next slide, please. And here we go.
Okay, drop! I'm here! 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 Yeah, my God! Here! 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 That's my head! Here! Here!
What up, got you, buddy. We got you, guys. We got you, buddy. We're right here. All right. We got you.
Next slide, please.
Obviously, this video captures the dangerous reality of the subject of my book and also what Craig and I will be covering tonight. But the outcome isn't always as fortuitous as this one. Fortunately, this guy had buddies who was skiing with him very close by, and also they were able to track his slide down the mountain. When I think about the backcountry and avalanches, there are two quotes that in particular sum up some important things for me. One is from Dr. Jordy Hendricks, who is head of the Montana State University's Snow and Avalanche Laboratory. He understatedly calls this the avalanche problem, quote unquote. In short, that means no matter how experienced and well-trained you are in backcountry skiing and avalanche awareness, you have one thing always working against you, and that is a 1% of unknowability about where avalanches are lurking. The other quote is from the former head of the Utah Avalanche Center and Craig Gordon's former boss, Bruce Tremper. And as he put it, the avalanche doesn't know you are an expert. Or as Craig Gordon likes to characterize it from two angles, what surprises me about snow is how much we get away with, how many close calls and near misses we have. Snow reinforces a lot of bad behavior.
Next slide. So yeah, you have bad behavior, you repeat that bad behavior, you repeat it again. Eventually, this is going to lead to a bad day. And I'll tell you something. What's most interesting about the snow, 99 times out of 100, nature allows you to get away with it. But there's that one time maybe you don't recognize something. It's slightly different. That's probably when most people get tricked. Next slide, please. So we'll take a look here at the Wasatch Range. This is a 30,000-foot view of this amazing playground, right? It's part of the global campus, and it's part of where Dragons in the Snow takes place. As a matter of fact, this is where snow science was generally created in Upper Little Cottonwood Canyon. So there's no science denying going on here because snowpack and snow studies is all about science. If we take could I get a next slide, please? And if we take a more of a boots on the ground approach, you know, it reveals a pretty small range. It's got easy access. There's over 1 million people in the Salt Lake Valley, and so there's high demand, unlimited renewables. Next, please.
So in January 2016, I and my wife, Marguerite, moved full-time to Utah's Ogden Valley by two great ski areas, Snow Basin and Powder Mountain. And I was struck from the beginning that winter how much avalanche bombing was going off in the mornings. I thought since I was now going to be spending so much time skiing in the mountains, I should learn more about avalanches and the kind of work people like Craig Gordon do. One day, I saw a poster in a ski shop for a 2-day course on avalanche awareness, and so I signed up. Of this picture of a skier coming down this beautiful slope with pristine snow, I want to say I wish this was me. But I think in signing up for that course, I was imagining that this was what the backcountry always promises. And that's only partly true. Partly. Tonight, you'll hear the full story.
Next, please. So here's the reality, is that the backcountry is getting busier. We've got better skis, beefier boots and bindings, better alpine touring gear, snowmobiles, and simply a desire to get into more untracked terrain. So unfortunately, backcountry snow, it's getting loved to death. Next.
So a moment for disclosure. I'm not an avalanche expert, nor am I a deeply experienced backcountry skier. I have skied out of snowcats in the backcountry 4 or 5 times and heli-skied a couple of times. And my experience with climbing skins is limited. Yes, I had to become a student of all these things. But to become an expert means not just the scholarship of snow and avalanches, but also logging long hours in the backcountry. What I brought to the book was a 35-year career as a journalist and writer. This is me circa 1987 covering a different kind of backcountry, jungle warfare on the Philippine island of Mindanao. And here's another dimension. Slide, please. Here's another dimension of the resume I brought to the book, a love of what some people call adrenaline sports, a lifelong love of surfing and, of course, skiing. This is me at Playa Colorado in southern Nicaragua. Pretty cool surfboard, wood laminate shaped by the famous shaper Donald Takayama.
Next, please.
And here on my home slopes in Utah's Powder Mountain, almost literally in my backyard.
Next, please.
And this is Craig Gordon, who I met the first night of that avalanche awareness course, and who became the central character of Dragons in the Snow.
Next.
This is what backcountry ski wizardry looks like.
Next, please.
This is what backcountry ski wizardry looks like. 100 or 200 or 300 tightly stitched turns in a place named Thousand Peaks Ranch. Perfect turns, courtesy of Craig Gordon.
Next, please.
So if you're going to write a book about avalanches, it turns out you have to begin with a storm, a big storm. And my storm began on January 5th, 2017. Here's what it looked like and what I wrote at the beginning of Dragons in the Snow. On January 5th, 2017, nearly 200 miles off the coast of northwestern North America, above the seething frigid waters of the Gulf of Alaska, an evolutionary moment began. It was unseen by human eyes, even the roving photographic gaze of a geostationary weather satellite orbiting 22,300 miles above the equator did not at first distinguish this cold whiff of wind and water. But it was really more like a dragon, uncoiling from the milky, numbing waters of the Alaskan Gulf. Its birth was a dragon's tail, dipping into the waves of the notoriously anarchic Gulf, feeding the buildup of its body and head. Weather forecasters watched it grow in time lapse, 15-minute increments through daytime photos and into nighttime infrared images, blue-hued water clouds swaddling the dragon's back and white ice clouds rimming its sinuous jaws. As it crested like a freezing tsunami above the Sierras, the snow dragon left behind stands of evergreens, snapped like vertebrae, stranded cars and 18-wheelers, severed power lines, and darkened empty mountain town streets. Then it fixed its leading edge, its snow-spitting jaws squarely to the east. Spread out in its path was a new mountainous quarry, the already snow-packed summits of Utah's Wasatch and Uinta ranges.
Next slide, please. Yeah, so if you're looking at this from space, it's churning, it's just cranking up in the Pacific, it's crusting over the Sierras. This is what we call an atmospheric river. You're really familiar with that in the Pacific Northwest. Here in Utah, if we get that kind of storm, and from a perspective of a snowpack that's already teetering on the edge, so you got a bunch of weak sugary snow near the ground, the additional weight is going to test the balance of stress and strength. And here's the deal, the snowpack, It doesn't know if you're an expert or a first timer, and luck doesn't cut it in the backcountry. So when you roll a dice and bank on luck in the backcountry, eventually the house is going to win. When that happens, then unfortunately, you're going to be toast. Next slide, please.
So you begin with a storm, but someone is inevitably on a collision course with that storm. And in my case, that someone turned out to be this guy, Jeremy Jones, a Utah snowboarder with the same name as a world-famous snowboarder from Truckee, California, who also has a snowboard company bearing his last name.
Next slide. Yeah, so I mentioned this quickly before. We've got this meteorological setup. It's called an atmospheric river, and AR. They're remarkable weather events because they originate from Hawaii. They impact coastal and then intermountain ranges. Here we call them pineapple expresses. And there's a tremendous amount of water, almost as much water as 27 times the Mississippi River. So what do we think about that in terms of avalanche forecasting? Really heavy snow. And the difficulties with forecasting these is they tend to stall in place. They tend to be overproducers. They are under forecast. And this can change not only the trajectory, but also the intensity. So very challenging events. And it's a ginormous conveyor belt of moisture. Next slide, please. So from ground zero, in California, this is what parking lots are looking like. Next slide. And if we give this a little bit of lift and we add some mountainous terrain, now there's so much snow, everything in sight is getting clobbered with snow. Next slide.
So after traveling through California and the Sierras, the storm rolls into the Wasatch and Uinta Ranges. And on January 11th, 2017, Jeremy Jones and 8 other snowboarders are headed into the backcountry on a snowcat. As the storm barreled into the Wasatch, Craig Gordon was up at about 3 a.m. that morning, as he always is in winter.
Next slide, please. And so here is the avalanche warning that I post online. There's a high probability, extreme likelihood of an unsurvivable avalanche. Next slide, please.
Here is how Jeremy Jones and the other riders were preparing for this storm. They conducted a practice buried avalanche beacon search. And here's a short passage about that. Maybe it's the lingering shadow of the avalanche advisory that Craig Gordon had issued, the overwhelming thrust of snow falling outside the cat's windows, or even the unfamiliarity of some of the riders with each other. Jones senses a subdued nervousness among the group, so he's happy when the snowcat arrives at a clearing where they can stage avalanche beacon practice. Jones is attentive as he watches the beacon practice. He wants to make sure everyone's equipment is functioning, and he wants to gauge the expertise and demeanor each rider shows in an avalanche rescue simulation. While the search is only practice, the gray light and heavy snow of the morning lend it an air of the real thing. Tentativeness or confusion in practice, Jones knows, does not bode well for someone's reactions deep in the backcountry. When real people are buried many feet under the snow, panic and confusion can replace the calm of a simulation. With no signs of the person's location, no ski pole protruding from the snow, no ski or snowboard visible in the cement-like morass of a big slide, searchers easily lose focus. They get caught up in the desperate minutes that feel like final sand particles in a tiny hourglass.
Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Back to Jeremy. Let's back it up. Can we back it up?
Can we back it up? I think we skipped ahead. Back it up a little bit.
One more. There we go. So here's Jeremy Jones about to drop in late that afternoon after they had gotten deep into the backcountry. So that day and Jeremy's last ride did not go so smoothly. Yes, they triggered an avalanche, and maybe Jones and his companions should have foreseen that, because that very morning when Craig posted his guidance, it was one of the 2 most dire avalanche advisories in his career. Extreme danger. To compound things, Jeremy Jones and another snowboarder were swept down the mountain and both buried. Rescued by other boarders, they began a long snowcat ride out in what had become night. And then the snowcat broke down. So 3 riders decided to hike out to reach their cars and cell service so they could alert rescuers.
Next slide, please.
So this is the gauntlet that Jeremy's wild plummet down the mountain had to pass through. Lots of trees, unwilling to speed his passage.
Next, please.
And when the story involves a massive storm and a snowboarder in the backcountry in avalanche conditions deemed extreme danger, it also often involves a rescue. Here's what I wrote. As the hours pass, the 3 riders have made their way into Oakley and, with cell service restored, have contacted Summit County Search and Rescue. As the rescue team plans a mission into the backcountry on snowmobiles, an alert goes out to other Salt Lake-based responders. In the air above the city's primary children's hospital, a life flight medical emergency helicopter has just taken off. The life flight crew decides to fly in over the Uintas and see what the situation looks like from the air. An Augusta Grand 109, the chopper is designed for high-altitude flight, originally built for rescues in the Swiss Alps. It bears a collision avoidance system for navigating above mountains, a bundle of highway in the sky, piloting instrumentation that guides pilots in low or zero visibility. Even inside the snowcat, Jones and his companions hear the distinct twin turbine sound of the heli coming in over the Uinta Range. When it grows closer, they realize it must be part of the rescue operation. From its underbelly, a powerful searchlight pierces the falling snow and illuminates the ground below, like the accident scene it is. Then the heli drifts down toward the clearing. Within minutes, the heli crew is inside the snowcat with a backboard. 2 men and a woman question Jones about his condition, and he offers a laconic, "I'm good." The woman inserts an IV into his arm. She tells Jones she will give him an injection to kill pain and knock him out during the flight to the hospital. Once airborne, the life flight heli crew find the weather deteriorating. All ground reference has been lost, and the crew is put into a 20-minute holding pattern. Soon, one of the crew spots the bare, distant headlights of a vehicle weaving its way through nearby Provo Canyon. They track the vehicle's progress, knowing it will eventually lead them near Timpanogos Regional Hospital in Orem.
Next slide, please.
So here's the impact of those trees that Jeremy ran into when he was plummeting down the mountain. His legs slammed into the trees by the avalanche, and both legs were broken. The right and the left shattered like matchsticks. And post-surgery, in the photo to the far right, a story of screws and steel rods.
Next, please. Yeah, so the next day I head in and I investigate the avalanche with a partner of mine from the Avalanche Center. And, you know, I'm armed with very little information, but basically I start walking up from the bottom of the slide path. I put the pieces together. And so it's sort of like a CSI moment for sure. And nearly all avalanche accidents come down to decision making. So I want to look at the layers of the snow because it reflects not only on the slope-specific layering, but also quite possibly the region-wide structure. It helps me to issue a better forecast. But we got to remember that snow is a tricky medium because it all looks the same. It all looks white. Next slide, please. We got to think about not only the snow we're riding in, but also the snow we're riding on. And oftentimes here in the Intermountain West, we get early season snows, which when we go for long periods of time without any good snowfall, without any good moisture, then that bottom starts to deteriorate. We lose its structure. We lose its strength. So yeah, it's a tricky medium. Like I said, it all looks white to me. So if I'm just thinking that I'm dealing with one type of avalanche circumstance, one type of layering, I'm looking for one type of avalanche dragon, it can often trick not only myself, but very experienced people. So we got to remember that the snowpack is layered. We not only need to think about the snow we're riding in, those surface layers, but also the snow we're riding on, those base layers. Next slide, please. So I'm right here, I'm in the belly of the beast, you know, and if you take a look at this, I mean, it looks like pretty good riding from that surface snow. Here I'm investigating the different layers, the width of the avalanche, what it broke on, and I'm going to queue up this this next video, which even though it wasn't from Jeremy's accident, it has similar structure, similar layering, and I describe kind of getting into the psyche and the layering of the snowpack. If you could give me that next slide. Good to go. What makes this such an unusual setup is we've received a lot of water. So maybe 36 inches of snow with 3 inches of water, and day after day after day of sustained southerly winds. It's put a very dense, cohesive slab, very strong snow that's gonna feel bomber under our skis, board, or sled. The problem is that is all resting on this very weak snow near the ground. Once you collapse the slope, it's game over. You pull a rug out from underneath, and now the entire mountain is crashing down on top of you. So when I talk about weak snow structure at the bottom, I often think of this as a bunch of dominoes sticking straight up. If we slowly load those dominoes, they adjust to the weight of the new snow. They become happy in their own skin. If I do that rapidly and then I come along and I tip all of those dominoes over, basically I pull a rug out from underneath the snowpack, and now I'm staring down the barrel of a very dangerous avalanche. So that's the kind of snow structure that tricks a lot of experienced people, people with decades of backcountry experience. That was sort of the setup that Jeremy and his crew dove into. Next slide, please. And now the next slide.
This is Titus Case, who spent 42 years at Alta Ski Area here in Little Cottonwood Canyon here in Utah. 27 of those years, Titus served as head of avalanche mitigation for Alta. Titus, who was a hale 67 years old when I met him, is one of many snow professionals I met while reporting the book, and whose work is chronicled through the book's 28 chapters.
Next slide, please.
Here's another former 10-year ski patroller and avalanche controller at Sundance Ski Resort, and now full-time backcountry ski guide, Shannon Finch. Shannon works with Park City Powder Cats, and I had the great pleasure to ski with her for a day on board a snowcat at Thousand Peaks Ranch in the Uinta Range. I became, in writing the book, ever more and deeply aware of the dangers in the backcountry, but I went to Thousand Peaks Ranch to focus on and write about not so much the dangers as the joys of backcountry skiing from a snowcat. Here's some of what I wrote about that day in the Uinta Range. The late novelist James Salter, in an essay titled The Skier's Life, observed that, quote, skiing, like dancing, seeks to be admired. The catch, as he astutely observed, is that just when you feel your skis getting dialed into the snow, when the turns seem to instinctively find a groove for themselves, you see someone off to the side performing turns of eternal grace and realize he or she is, as Salter put it, the skier you will never be. Aboard the snowcat, we ascended to a peak overlooking a wide bowl with no obstacles in sight, just unfurling vertical plains of untouched snow. The hesitation I'd felt earlier had melted away in the mid-morning sun. Once I was secure in my bindings, I skied a traverse to my left, and Shannon Finch followed behind me. At the top, I paused for a few seconds as she drew up to a stop, maybe a dozen feet away. Then we both dropped in. Immediately, I found rhythm in my turns, my pole plants, soft jabs, my knees connecting with the jackrabbit bounce that fed off the trampoline snap of the snow. Turn after turn, I shed my deliberations with my skis and fell into a kind of meditative state, where speed and just the tiniest increments of effort, more like thoughts than muscle, governed direction changes. As I finished every turn, I could see out of the corner of my uphill eye the shadow of the rooster tail of snow flung into the air by the tails of my skis. As if in slow motion, the snow was landing with its own subtle hush, as if each flake was like a fingertip on the earth, a slow white narcosis enveloping the mountain behind me. In the runout below, I rounded up near the Piston Bully snowcat, Finch just feet away from me. We looked up toward the peak where we'd initiated the run. "Look at our turns," she said gleefully. Like something from a physics text, our turns were two mirror images, precisely matched, not so much something drawn in the snow, but carvings suspended in time, the frozen currents mapped as if visible contrails left by the feathers of swerving swallowtails. All afternoon, runs like this ribboned out behind me in whirls of white. The Uinta peaks stood from valley to valley like an array of gargantuan bleached conch shells.
Next, please.
So here's Shannon going Mach 2 or 3 on her alpine touring setup, right after doing a slope cut where she tested the snow's stability. Here's how I captured it in the book. On her freeheel telemark skis, Finch made a slow curve to her left and dropped into the steepest part of the mountain's face. It was as if she had transformed her entire physical being into that of a raptor. Slowly, beginning at 6,000 or 7,000 feet of altitude, she was in her turn earthward. Then, as her body angled sharply forward, her arms tucked in close to her ribs, as if she was folding wings back for aerodynamic perfection. Within seconds, her speed seemed to have doubled. She began to stitch a slim series of turns. From where I stood, I could see Finch's lead ski reach down the precipitous face as her knee and thigh followed in a stretch of pure physiognomic defiance. The tips of her ski poles were like claws barely piercing the air. Behind her silhouette, the afternoon sun captured each arc like advancing frames shot from a camera's motorized shutter. Click, 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 and then, far below, Shannon Finch was gone.
Next slide, please.
So I didn't just want to tell avalanche stories in the book. I also wanted to explore state-of-the-art equipment, which included avalanche mitigation methods, backcountry skis, and avalanche safety gear, like inflatable rescue backpacks. So to tell that latter story, I went to see the designers at Black Diamond Equipment Company in Salt Lake City, including Pete Gompert, their chief designer, who was instrumental in developing their JetForce avalanche backpack. It turned out to be a story of classic American ingenuity and invention. Here's a glimpse from the book of what it took. Gompert searched for his own blue flash of innovative spark, and then he looked at a computer. Not at the screen or the keyboard or the mouse. Rather, he thought about the back of a typical desktop. Every workstation has a little round vent on the rear of its boxy metal enclosure. Behind that vent is a fan. Holding that image in his mind, Gompert made his way to Black Diamond's IT department. Did they have any spare desktop cooling fans? Finding one available, he took it and went on another search for a spare plastic office garbage bag. Carefully sealing the output vent of the computer fan to the garbage bag, he plugged in the fan. As the little blades whirred to life, he timed the inflating of the bag. In just under 15 seconds, he saw the bag was a belly of air, an imperfect life ring for cradling a skier's head and shoulders and buoying the skier to the surface of an avalanche. It was ugly, without any of Black Diamond's elegant craftsmanship, but Gompert felt he could make it beautiful. The computer fan had worked, but it didn't have the explosive power Gompert needed. He asked around Black Diamond if anyone knew about electric motors used in radio control airplanes. Based on some feedback, he searched the internet for the smallest, fastest fan he could find. He needed a durable fan that was part wind generator and part bomb. He finally found it in an unlikely place, a radio-controlled airplane company's website, Horizon Hobby, that sold a miniature motorized fan for model jets that can fly over 200 miles per hour. The motor's part was designated the E-Flight BL-15 ducted brushless. Its name was Outrunner. When the motor was switched on, its blades spun at 70,000 revolutions per minute, 1,333 revolutions per second, fast enough to maybe even outrun an avalanche.
Next slide, please.
It looks like when it's triggered in the backcountry.
Next, please.
So I began earnest work on the book in late January 2017. I went through the end of that ski season and through the summer and early fall. On October 9th, I got an email news report from Outside Magazine, and it said that an avalanche accident had happened in the Montana backcountry just outside Bozeman. And it involved this young, expert, even world-class couple who were climbers and ski mountaineers. Their names were Hayden Kennedy and Inge Perkins. On October 7th, a Saturday, they had hiked 6 miles from a trailhead through fresh snow to skin up and ski down an 11,000-foot summit named Imp Peak.
Next, please.
Hit it again.
And hit it again, please.
And this photo attests that Inge Perkins was a world-class athlete and a pretty fearless climber.
Next.
So this is Imp Peak. This is where Kennedy and Perkins had climbed to within 1,000 feet of the top when an avalanche broke loose. This photo also gives you a feel for the angle, about 38 to 45 degrees. The avalanche, highlighted with the red circle on the photo, carried the couple several hundred feet down. Perkins was completely buried, and Kennedy was partially buried up to his chest. Quickly extricating himself, Kennedy spent the next 3 hours trying to find his partner, and to no avail. Then he planted his shovel and avalanche probe where he had been buried and hiked the 6 miles out, alone. Driving back to Bozeman to the couple's apartment, he then wrote a letter noting the GPS coordinates of the accident. Then he took his life.
Next, please. And this will be a video. A shot from the heli as they come in the next morning. So you can get a little bit of an overview of the week report, and you see where the accident occurred as we start to come in. So early season snowfall, a little bit of wind, as Ed described, terrain that's deep enough to avalanche. Everything sort of comes into view here, so you get a really good sense of what's going on. Super tragic avalanche accident. I mean, it's just a crushing event. And here, flying over the slide, you get a little bit of an idea. Not a particularly large avalanche, but just enough, given all the factors, that it turns out to have a really tragic ending. Next slide, please.
So this is a still photo, obviously not as dramatic as the helicopter coming in that morning, but it shows a snow pit that Doug Chabot of the Avalanche Center in Bozeman dug. And what's interesting about the photo is what it reveals about the avalanche. It was actually small, as Craig said, and shallow compared to many of them. As Doug Chabot told me, it is about the smallest an avalanche can be and still kill someone. So here I was in the midst of working on a book about avalanches, and I had gotten this news report about the accident. To be honest, once I researched Kennedy's and Inge Perkins' backgrounds, I was conflicted a little about doing an in-depth chapter on the accident. But I spoke to several avalanche experts, including Craig, and to a person they advised me to move forward. These people are in the business of saving lives from such accidents, and I think they felt strongly there were lessons here. And beyond chronicling details of the accident, I felt I could also celebrate the amazing, if young, lives Kennedy and Perkins had led. And in sticking to the facts of the story, I leave it to the readers to glean what lessons they might take away.
Next slide, please.
So the aftermath of an avalanche accident and injuries and death has a long emotional and psychological echo that rings through the lives of those involved and who survive such tragedies. This is Megan Michelson, a very talented ski journalist who, with her husband-to-be, was one of the survivors of the Tunnel Creek avalanche, recounted in precise and expansive detail in the New York Times, coverage which won the reporter a Pulitzer Prize. When I approached Michelson 7 years after the accident, it wasn't to tell the story again. That had been done expertly. Rather, it was to help the reader understand how such an experience can change one's life forever.
Next, please.
These are the 16 skiers who gathered that day in Stevens Pass in Washington State, all of them experts, double black diamond skiers facing 17 inches of new powder snow, and some of them had seen morning avalanche forecasts warning about unstable snow conditions. But because most of the group did not know each other, no one spoke out. This is something else I get into in Dragons in the Snow, the psychology of risk-taking and the desire to ski fresh powder snow on steep slopes.
Next, please.
Here are the 3 men who died in the Tunnel Creek avalanche. Jim Jack, considered one of the best skiers at Stevens Pass. Chris Rudolph, the ski resort marketing director who had put the day together. And John Brennan, a father of 2 children. Here's why Megan Michelson is still willing to talk about an experience that today still echoes nightmarish images and feelings for her. Today, Michelson is the mother of 2 young children who are beginning skiers. After first thinking she might never again return to the backcountry, she finally did, but with a completely new set of personal rules. Quote, I have changed my entire approach to the days that I ski, who I ski with, how I approach the backcountry. I'm much more cautious now, and I also make decisions for myself now. And I would never go in a group setting like that where I wasn't the one choosing what terrain I was going to ski. Her determination to ski safely is hard-won, and while she doesn't think every skier or snowboarder learns only through tragedy, she believes some people are too easily seduced by a slope of untracked powder. I don't think anyone looks at a run and says, this is worth dying for, Michelson said. No one thinks that way, but I do think people look and say, well, the chances of an avalanche happening here are low, and I want to ski some powder. There's all these things. It hasn't snowed in a while, and I've got this desire to get out there. I'm with all these friends, and I haven't skied in a while. Conditions are perfect. I've got the day off from work. I think people trick themselves into thinking it's going to be safe, and they're going to be fine, and we obviously did that day. The path forward might have been easier for Michelson if she declined to talk about Tunnel Creek. 7 years is a long time to confess mistakes. But she believes that the more backcountry training people get, the more they understand what causes things to go wrong. I think it's just really important to get that education out there so that people understand the risks they're taking and know what steps they need to take before they head out of bounds. And if a tragic story like the season of the Tunnel Creek avalanche can help remind people of that, then at least we didn't lose those 3 men for nothing. At least we can use their stories to help other people make better decisions than we did. That's really the only reason why I'm still talking about it.
Next, please.
So here's Craig Gordon again. I don't know if he's working on his suntan here, and he does always have a great suntan, or trying out some new kind of winged way to travel in the mountains. But with Craig, life is a constant juggling act between fun and sometimes tragedy in the backcountry.
Next, please.
This is Brian McInerney of the Salt Lake City National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Office. He actually just recently retired. But at the time I was working on the book, Brian was the state's premier hydrologist, or in layman's terms, he's a water scientist. He was also the point person for Utah climate change data. So when I set out to write this book, I had no intent of writing about climate change. Frankly, I'm not a scientist, I'm an English major. And there are journalists who have made entire careers over covering that story. But in my scores of interviews with people who are snow professionals, professional skiers and snowboarders and ski movies, snow professors, psychologists, and others, the subject just kept coming up. And as we entered the second half of the 2018-2019 ski season, we were celebrating what some epic powder skiing we were having. So I went to see Brian, an epic powder skier who also happens to be a very smart scientist. So where's the evidence of climate change? I posed to him. We hardly know where to put all this snow. Here's what Brian told me. I think the naysayers get weather and climate confused, he cautioned. Weather, in other words, was last week's fresh 14 inches of powder snow. Climate is the trend in precipitation and temperature over the past 30 years and the next 30 years. And then Brian mapped out for me a timeline he'd been working on. The timeline he's mapped is beyond shocking. For skiers and snowboarders, whether in resorts or the backcountry, it could lead to the global transformation and ultimate end of a sport and way of life. Between now and then, the likelihood of more dangerous avalanches will announce themselves in more of a bang than a whimper. Quote, you start putting the pieces together and you learn by the 2035 to 2065, areas that are 100% snow covered in the Wasatch are only going to be 50% snow covered or less. Probably by 2100, you'll only have snow in December, January, and February, and big and little cottonwood canyons at the top. And in the Uintas and the rest of the Wasatch is going to be snow-free. We'll just have rain during the wintertime. That's a tough one to take on so many levels.
Next, please. And so this slide helps to illustrate Alaska's Muir Glacier and exactly what Brian is talking about. These are essentially time-lapse photos of the Muir Glacier over about roughly a century. And the glacier in that time has retreated more than 31 miles. So pretty mind-blowing there. Next slide, please. You know, though, for me, that is so Alaska. That's so remote. That's so far away. But it's unrelatable in a lot of people's minds. But when I look closer to home, the photos of the Wasatch, this is in my own backyard, 15 minutes from my house. These photos tell a tale of two very different winters. So you see the end of June of 2011, big year. And then in the mid-season in March in a low snow year. So we definitely know something is going on here. Photo, next image, please.
When I got to the end of my discussion with Brian about the mountains, snow, and climate change, I mentioned that I have a 3-year-old grandson, Clark Power, whom I am desperate to introduce to skiing. This is what I wrote and what Brian said. My aspiration to teach Clark to ski in a year or so will likely happen, but after creating all that winter wonder and happiness in his life, I'll one day pass away and leave him to wonder why my generation and preceding ones had not acted responsibly to preserve this shared joy of sliding down snowy slopes in the mountains. Gone might be an inheritance of nature's joy for his generation and others to come. When your grandson, when he's an adult, McInerney told me, he'll look at our legacy and say, why did they wait? Why did they not do anything about this? Why are we having to deal with their inaction and their indifference and apathy? That, I think, is a pretty tough legacy for us to have. We could have done something.
Next, please.
And finally, here we are at the end of Dragons in the Snow with my central character, the summer ski-loving Craig Gordon. For 28 years, now going on 30, Craig has skied at least one day of every month, July, August, and September included. And all of those runs have been in Utah except 1 month, September 2018, when he couldn't find skiable snow, and so traveled to Mount Hood in Oregon, which offers essentially year-round skiing on a glacier. As my work on Dragons in the Snow wound down in the spring and early summer of this year, I had been following Craig for nearly 3.5 years. And since every book has an ending, here is a short excerpt from mine. In the first few months of my living in the Ogden Valley in early 2016, I had become attuned on most winter mornings to the sound of avalanche bombings echoing across the valley like sonic booms from an invisible jet fighter. Over time, I thought of these bombings as the day's evidence of the winter war against Gordon's snow dragons. They lurked up there, waiting for unsuspecting skiers and boarders. And there were more potential victims heading into the backcountry. It may be that, like the rest of terrestrial life on the planet, skiers and boarders in the backcountry, its own white-dusted planet, are finally making their increasing numbers known. This, added to rainfalls higher in the mountains, more dramatic freezing and warming cycles, and unstable snowpack, suggests the propensity of avalanches has reached a tipping point of greater numbers in uncustomary places. Gordon and his colleagues think so. The snowpack, in a sense, is beginning to rebel. Over the many months and 3 winters I've spent with him, I've come to see that Craig isn't your average guy grinding out a living in a profession that just happens to be a little different from those New Jersey Joes he went to high school with. No, Gordon has achieved something transcendent. He's ventured out at midnight into the teeth of blizzards, studied snow as it was shot from the atmosphere toward Earth, swooped in helicopters over the Uinta mountain peaks, attacking avalanches, watched a billion flakes, settle and link arms, learned to know the crystal's quirks and all their sublime, beautiful moods. Through all this, Gordon has ascended to a higher plane in his understanding of snow and of people when they venture into snow. I started in this for one thing, the love of skiing in the backcountry, he once told me, but then it grew into such a bigger thing where I realized it is so much bigger than me. It's sort of like Christmas morning when you are giving the gifts back, and the reward is that you know you have contributed a lot to your community.
Next slide, please.
So now Craig and I would be happy to take a few questions.
And I got to fill in a little time here for a moment or two. And for all of this, I have led a remarkably blessed life, and it has been an amazing experience to meet Ed here. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight.
Questions?
Yeah, we got any questions coming up?
Oh. Looks like we may be.
I'm here.
There
he is.
All right. Sorry about that delay there. So yeah, I'm Shane. I'm an event manager here at Town Hall Seattle, and we'll be taking your questions here. So if you're watching on Crowdcast, you can submit them down below using the Ask a Question button. If you're watching on YouTube, you can put it in the chat there. So we have one question here from Allison, and Allison asks, how do you feel about folks who, knowing that danger levels are super high, take a risk and go out anyway, putting at life-threatening risk all those who then must perform a rescue?
That's one for Craig.
Yeah, so I'll feel that. So I think that if you've got the skill set and you realize that you're dealing with an elevated avalanche danger, then it is your responsibility, number one, to avoid the avalanche altogether, which we can easily do. So even though there's a high or an elevated avalanche hazard, the way we manage that is with our terrain choices. So you can be in the mountains, you can be in the backcountry every day during the winter. What you need to do is you tone down your slope angles, you avoid where the avalanche dragon lives. And the remarkable thing is that we've got hardworking women and men who knock down the avalanches every day at ski resorts. So you always have that exit strategy. There is always a place to go. And I'll tell you, if it's a day where you're hiding under the beds because the avalanche danger is so off the charts, I mean, we've kind of become a little accustomed to figuring things out in the world of COVID. We relax, we have a little bit of patience, and that's really the big game when it comes to mountains and when it comes to snow. Patience and time is really going to be our friend.
Thank you. So while we wait for more questions, a question for you, Ed. Throughout the couple of years that you were working on this book, did you spend time with Craig out in the field ever and go out into the mountains and kind of experience those sorts of things with him?
I didn't really experience the true work in the backcountry, which sometimes is, in distant, remote areas, and also sometimes involves work he's doing to respond to the occurrence of an avalanche, and even in some cases deaths from it. I did ski with him some, yeah, and we did go into the Thousand Peaks Ranch once on a snowcat and spend some time there. But yeah, I mean, his insights into what goes on in the backcountry are so vivid that over the 3.5 years I spent working on the book, I think a lot of that conveyed pretty well and pretty easily, actually, because he so much loves what he does that when we got together regularly, I mean, I don't even know countless times to talk about what was going on with the snow and storms and conditions in the backcountry. And again, when he talks about those things, he loves it all so much that it's pretty easy if you're a journalist to get great interviews.
Absolutely. Thank you. Question for you, Craig. Earlier this week, we were kind of talking about, we had to reschedule our meeting because you had to go out into a remote area of the mountains and you had a very narrow window of opportunity. Can you talk a little bit more about what you were doing and how that helps your work?
Yeah, excellent question. And, it's nothing really dramatic or sexy or anything like that, but it helps in the big picture. So we actually rescheduled our original tech check because I had a window of time to install a remote weather station. And what that helps me with, and I've got a series of them that I've installed in the Western Uinta Mountains, and I'm not the only one that has these. Anyone who runs an avalanche center or a ski resort, remote weather stations are sort of dotted all over the place. So you have wind sites along the ridges, you have snow sites in areas that collect kind of a representative snowpack evaluation. And that's exactly what I was doing that day, Shane. So I had a window to get all of this gear up, and it's hundreds of pounds of gear and tripods and masts and then very delicate instruments. And we got all of that set up. One day included kind of a comms check that we could talk with our communication system to a peak site, which then bounces off of through radio telemetry. Several other sites, downloads all of this information to the National Weather Service, and then spits it out to the public. It's through a conduit called the MesoWest. So that's all available to the public. And any of these programs, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So again, it might seem very white collar and very sexy writing the forecast and talking about avalanches, but man, there's a lot of blue collar work and boots on the ground work. That is really the deliverable where I connect with the community and help to get this information out and help to get it out in a decipherable fashion that anybody can look at it. And back to your earlier viewers' questions, we can take all of this information, we take our avalanche forecast, but then we can also grab all of these other tidbits and we can reevaluate where we're going to go for that day based on what the weather is doing, what the forecast is doing. Remember, snow isn't a static medium, so we need to be flexible as well.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I touched on in the book about Craig's forecasting is with the explosive use of and power of the internet, he gets a lot of data and photos and all of it from the backcountry itself. He has people who send him photos of avalanches that have happened or other snow condition aspects, and that helps, I think, these guys put together their forecasts and communicate real-time kinds of things to skiers and snowboarders who want to know what's going on before they go out.
Absolutely.
And Shane, you have in Seattle, you have a remarkable crew there with NWAC. And
yes.
That's your local avalanche center. I mean, they're super similar to what the Utah Avalanche Center does here in Utah. We're a statewide program. And so all of the forecasters, since there's only a handful of us, and we cover wide swaths of terrain, right? These community-based programs, which both of our organizations are the epitome of, we crowdsource all of this information, we distill it, we let it marinate a little bit, and then we get that out to the public. So all of these community-based programs really help to save lives. So I encourage all your viewers, definitely support your local avalanche center.
Indeed, yes. I'm going to kind of combine two questions here. So this comes from Chuck. Chuck, and I'm going to tie the other one into this as well. Kind of going into what kicked this all off with Ed taking that avalanche awareness course. Chuck is wondering, what basic advice can you give to people going backcountry skiing for the first time in a relationship to avalanches? Take a class first, reading workshops, and I'm going to tie into that this question from John Stembers from the Washington State Department of Transportation, asking, can you tell us about youth education efforts?
Well, go.
Yeah, great questions. And I'm going to tie Ed in with this as well. So first, let's start off. The best place to start is with some basic avalanche awareness. So, a Know Before You Go class, which is a dynamic 45-minute class where you can get all of this information. You'll know the right resources to go to. It's not going to turn you into a snow scientist. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 plus years. I'm no snow scientist, but I know how to get in and out of the mountains every day. I have great powder skiing and riding, and most importantly, I get home safely to my family at the end of the day. You get down to the trailhead, high five each other, know that you made good decisions. And I'm going to flip it over to Ed, because you were part of a class where we went from basic avalanche awareness to a 3-hour evening class on a Thursday. Mm-hmm. And then that segued into a Saturday field day.
Day in the mountains. Yeah, I mean, I'm a journalist, obviously. I talked about that in the presentation. And so I'm curious by nature. And so when I heard these avalanche bombings going off so much in the mornings, I thought, well, one, I want to learn more about who these people are, what they're doing. But also I thought, I really need to learn about this for my own safety, because I was spending a lot of time going up into the mountains to ski with my wife. And so I saw that there was going to be this class, and came in on that Thursday night, and Craig came in larger than life, just having been at this avalanche accident site. And he really didn't talk about that so much that night, because I think he was still in the midst of really investigating and putting his information together. But, just very vivid presentation about the backcountry and avalanche awareness, and some of the tragedies that have happened, but also some of the beauty of it. And then on that Saturday, we spent a full day, from early in the morning until basically 5 o'clock or so, maybe even a little later than that. And we met with the ski patrol at Snow Basin Resort, which was the ski resort where we did the training. And they, gave us some insights into the work they do and some of the avalanches they've dealt with at Snow Basin. And then we went out on the slopes and into what I would really describe as more like side country, I think, terrain. And we dug snow pits. We did avalanche beacon practice searches. Really engaging with the tools, the beacons, the shovels, and the probe poles, so we could learn how to use that equipment in the backcountry. That is only a bare beginning to this thing. If you really want to get into this seriously, you've got to go take an Avalanche 1, probably a 2-level course, and then there is a 3-level, which tends to be more for people who are snow professionals or people who want to be snow professionals. But and then you've got to spend the time in the backcountry, and it isn't just hours; it's weeks, it's months, it goes into years. To really understand the terrain and understand what to look for. So. Yeah, it's very involved, and it's serious. It's super important to have that training.
And let me circle back to my kindred snow spirit out there. Thanks for tuning in, John. And great question about youth education. Little bit of a divergent path here. So remember, we call some of that terrain that's adjacent to a ski resort side country. But man, even though that's an easy moniker for us to talk about, it truly is backcountry. Because once you step over the other side of the rope line, you go past that sign that says no ski patrol, no avalanche control, ski area boundary, you are responsible for your own avalanche forecasting, your own rescue, everything. You in essence become your own avalanche forecaster in that regard. So remember, Avalanche avoidance, that's paramount. If we got to use rescue gear, that means that we've screwed up. And so the basic place to start, and you're absolutely right, John, with youth education. And the Know Before You Go program, which was created here and launched in 04, 05, has become not only a national program, but a global program as well. It's been reissued and reformatted and retooled. Red Bull has helped us out a lot with that and helping us to really spread the Avalanche gospel. And now it's in over a dozen languages worldwide. I mean, we're looking at not only a global, but a galactic takeover as well. So we want to get it out to everybody. And that's really where Avalanche education starts, whether you're a skier, boarder, sledder, hunter, hiker, scoutmaster, whatever you're doing. You need to get kind of just the basic Avalanche fundamentals, the basic information under your belt before you even consider heading out into the backcountry. And I know that that's a program that is widely available in your zone.
Awesome. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I know at least here in Washington and I think Oregon, Northwest Avalanche Center is a really good resource. I believe the Mountaineers also has some programs, I think in partnership with NWAC as well. So at least out here in the Northwest, those are good resources. I wonder if, unfortunately we're out of time for questions, but before we conclude, I wonder if there's additional resources you could mention outside of the book, just like other resources, other books or tools online that folks could look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're looking for avalanche advisories throughout the nation, avalanche.org, avalanche.ca for Canada, and then Know Before You Go has got its own site, and that's kbyg.org. And we've got some great online e-learning modules. So everything sort of progresses off of the last learned module. You can continue in that. You can go to your first Avalanche class, fully front loaded. You'll be the star of the show. So we will make that happen for you. You can always, if you're here in Utah, please visit us at utahavalanchecenter.org. If you have any further questions, contact Ed or I. I know neither of us are ever too busy to help share the Avalanche gospel. And as we say in Utah, keep people on top of the greatest snow on earth rather than buried beneath it. So it's been such an honor to work with Ed. It's been such a pleasure that you invited us into your homes tonight. And we want to thank you for that.
Yeah, Shane, Craig and I wanted to thank Town Hall again for hosting us and also for everyone who tuned in. And just let people know that Dragons in the Snow is available print, ebook, and audiobook, and available at mountaineers.org and other major booksellers, but also as well as independent booksellers, especially Third Place Books. So thanks again for tuning in tonight.
All right. And I want to thank our audience as well. And thank you, Ed and Craig, for being with us this evening. If you enjoyed this event, you can find many more like it on our website, townhallseattle.org. We hope you'll consider making a donation, as your support will allow us to continue to provide events just like this one. As Ed mentioned, if you're interested in purchasing a copy of Ed's book, Dragons in the Snow, Avalanche Detectives, and the Race to Beat Death in the Mountains, please use the link on this live stream page to purchase through our friends at Third Place Books. It is also available on Mountaineers Books as well. Finally, thank you again for being here. We hope you have a great evening.